Today we're doing some load balancer scripting in AWS. Let's go. Hey there, this is Tom with Tom Tech Show, and today we're going to go over doing some scripting, adding a rule into a load balancer. So when you create a load balancer and it has an application behind it, typically you want that to run on HTTPS. You want it to be on secure communication. But when you go to that URL, sometimes people will just type in the URL and it'll look at the standard port 80. I'm sure at some point in the future the browsers are going to change that where the default will be HTTPS, but for right now they're hitting port 80. And so what we want to do is automatically redirect that traffic from port 80 to port 443 so that we can get them on a secure channel, get the secure communication going. And we're going to do this with PowerShell, of course. So here is the script. Now, you have different ways of connecting and creating your connection into AWS. I just put that up here. We need to import the AWS module, use a key and a secret to attach to AWS. And with this script, we're actually going to be this script is pretty general, so it's going to be able to go through as many regions as you want and find all of the load balancers in all of those regions, and then find all of the listeners in all of those regions and all the security groups in all of those regions and update them. So this is pretty extensive what we're going to be changing here. So first thing we need to do is do this loop, which is for every region in my region list. So I've set up my regions that I want to scan for load balancers. Okay, so we're going to set the region, and then we're going to do this load balancer list, get ELB to load balancer. So when I do get ELB to load balancer, it's just going to get all of the load balancers that are in all the type 2 load balancers. There are type 1s that you can do kind of run the script again, but just to use ELB load balancer. But for just this example, we're doing the version 2 load balancers. Okay, so now that we have all the load balancers in that region, we want to cycle through those, which is the for each load balancer in my load balancer list. Okay. Now we need to then pull from that, we need to get the listeners. So within each load balancer, there's a listener. And now these listeners will take what traffic's coming in and redirect that to a target group, a group of servers that you want to send the information to. That group can be just one server. If you have a simple application, that group can be multiple servers if you're doing load balancing and application kind of sharing and stuff like that. So this right here gets the list of the ELB2 listeners that are on each individual load balancer. So as we go through the load balancer, we're going to grab all the listeners to that load balancer, and then we're going to cycle through all of the listeners because we don't want to add a port 80 listener if one already exists. If one is already there, okay, that's already been set up, or it's being used for some other function. You have a port 80 function on a load balancer and you have a port 443 function on a load balancer. We don't want to overwrite that. Okay, so if that listener port has a port 80, we're skipping it. We're just going to write out to the console, listener exists. Okay, so if it doesn't exist, then we do the else, which is this code right here. So in order to do this, we're going to have to combine some multiple objects. So we're going to be creating an action. So the load balancer has an action that it needs to do, and that action is to either forward it to something, you redirect it to something. So if we look at this here, this is the function. If you search for that function, the Amazon Elastic Load Balancing version 2 model, looking at the model, what we're doing is we're coming down here and we're looking at the redirect action. So if we click the redirect action, then that's going to give me a bunch of parameters that I need to add. So I need a host, I need a path, port, protocol, query, status code. I need all these things to be in my redirect. So that's going to be combining multiple objects. So here, right here, we have this redirect configuration. So, and here I'm going to take, we have to have host, path, port, protocol, and query. So these are all the things that were in the object model here that we need to add. Okay, so our host is going to be just the current host that we're on. So somebody hits that web server, we just want to have them go from the port 80 to 443, so the host is going to be the same. And then the path, we also want to take the path with us. So if if there's a subfolder that you're directing people to inside your application, that also follows through. And we're going to push them over to port 443, and we're going to moving that protocol from HTTP to HTTPS. And then the query is any parameters that are after the URL. So you're sending a login code, you're sending some type of parameter that's going to take them to a certain form. We also want to patch that in the query part. And the status code, which is permanently moved, which is the HTTP 301, that's going to tell it this is moved over here permanently. Okay, now that we have our redirect configuration set up, now we need to go to the Amazon Elastic Load Balancing Model action. So if I look over here, there's Elastic Load Balancing Volume version 2 model, and I click the action object in that, and we come down here and there is the type. So the type is these load balancing version 2 action types, which we also then expand. And the types are redirect, forward, fixed response, and 2 different types of authentication. So what we're going to be doing in this case is redirecting. We're taking you off of the port 80 and we're moving you on to port 443. And then in that, there's a redirect configuration, which we then set to our redirect configuration that we defined here. So we're defining objects that we're using in other defined objects to then place in the action of the load balancer. So now we get down here, say new ELB to listener. The load balancer, we need the ARN of the load balancer to tell it what we're defining it and putting it as. Listen on port 80, and the listening protocol is just HTTP, and then our default action is this redirect action configuration. So then when that gets posted, so if somebody types, www.mywebsite.com and you hit enter, it's going to see that, take them and change them over to HTTPS, www.website. Okay. So what we need to do next is find the security group that is attached to that load balancer, and then scan all of the rules inside that security group to see if port 80 is allowed. Because if port 80 is not allowed in that security group, traffic is not going to flow to your load balancer. Now, if it's not there, then we need to add it. So then that's this code here. So we're going to add this port and create another object, which is the IP permission object, which includes our protocol, our to and from port, and what IP address ranges are allowed. And then we do a grant, which grants that object permission to our security group. So then once we get done with that, then we're going to go back to our next listener. So if there's more than one listener, we're going to make sure that we get through all of them. So then we go back the next level higher, which is the next load balancer. And then once we go through all those load balancers in that region, then we go back to the next region and then do the whole thing again to all the load balancers in the next region. So this covers all of your load balancers in all of the regions that you define. It's going to go and add this rule so that it forwards over, so you keep your traffic on HTTPS. And that's where we want everybody to be. Of course, you'll have to have on your HTTPS side your certificates and everything set up, which are provided free by Amazon. So as long as you're keeping your resources in Amazon. So that's kind of a nice thing too. So, all right, well, this will get your traffic moved over from HTTP to HTTPS. And it's a pretty set piece of code. You can just run it and run it multiple times, because once it sees that the rule is there and the security group is configured correctly, it's not going to do it again. It's just going to go find the ones that are not configured that way and reconfigure them. All right. So if you have any questions about this code or any other code that I've written, it's all up on my Bitbucket. That's going to be linked below. Remember to like, share, subscribe to the channel. And thanks everybody who has subscribed. I appreciate it. And all your comments are great. Everything's great interacting with people. I really love working at this channel and stuff. And hopefully some of this stuff is helping you. And thanks for watching. Take care.